Hi everyone, Andy Allen for Applied Shotokan here. Just want to share some thoughts on a letter that came out recently from JKA. You may have seen this going around in different Facebook groups, so I'll just read the letter to you. It's addressed to JKAWF member countries and organizations. So the JKAWF is the World Federation. It's the JKA outside of Japan, to which I used to belong to years ago. And within that, I was part of the ISKF, the International Shotokan Karate Federation, which is basically the America's branch of the JKAWF. I'm very familiar with all this stuff in the letter, and which is one of the reasons why I ended up leaving my old Shotokan organization in 2020. Here is the letter. Dear representatives, we appreciate your continuous support for promoting JKA karate in the world. You may have received the invitation for the seminars organized by Japan Traditional Karate Association, JTK, which will be held in Denmark and in Germany, and it goes on to give the dates. Here's the kicker. We must indicate to you all that JKA has nothing to do with the JTK. In addition, JKA does not allow the participation in their seminars. Therefore, please be aware that attending those seminars may violate the ethics and disciplinary regulations. It's a bit clunky there with the English translation. We would like to ask you to make this issue known to your every club, dojo, and member. Signed off from the managing director of the JKA headquarters. Okay, let's talk about that. So again, when I was part of the JKA, the JKAWF, and the ISKF, I'm very familiar with this because directives would come down from the senior members in Japan, and we were expected to abide. So I can remember distinctly, don't go train with this person. Don't go train with that group. Don't go train with that group. And at the time I was young, I didn't think much of it. I just said, I was a good soldier, and I was doing what I thought was appropriate for conforming. And Japanese culture is one of conformity, but us in the West, not so much. As I get older, of course, I started to question things more. So let's look at the bits and pieces of that letter. So one line says, JKA has nothing to do with the JTK. So it's as if there's some sort of obvious expectation from the JKA headquarters that, hey, you're not to go train outside the JKA bubble. Everything you need is here, and don't go venture outside that bubble. That's the impression I got years ago, and that's kind of what this is suggesting as well. When in fact, we should be training outside our organization. We should be training other martial arts, and I'll elaborate on that later based on my experience. The letter goes on to say, JKA does not permit participation in their seminars, that being the JTK. As someone wrote in a Facebook group, a conversation last week, this is adults, the senior members in the JKA, telling other adults, people like me, what they can and cannot do. And I think this might be a matter of Japanese culture versus Western culture. They're not the same. So Japan is somewhat of a culture of conformity. I've never been there, but that's my understanding. And but in the West, we don't really think that way. So when we're told what we can and can't do for no real good reason, we start to question that. We should start to question that, but a lot of us don't, and we just say yes and move on. The letter goes on and says, attending seminars may violate ethics and disciplinary regulations. Ethics. What possible violation of ethics could there be by training outside your organization? Think about that, really. That's not a violation of ethics. It's, if anything, it shows a willingness to grow and evolve from other influences. And what's wrong with that? The JKA is I don't think it's really changed in decades. It's been the same in the name of tradition. When in fact, the only thing that's truly traditional about karate is the willingness to change, the willingness to evolve. Funakoshi wrote years ago, let me try to get this straight. The world changes, how's it go? times change, the world changed, and obviously so too much the martial arts changed, something like that. So at the time, he was talking about the post-Meiji restoration and how there's the combative nature of martial arts was de-emphasized, and they're moving in towards more of the spiritual development, the do. And so karate had taken on this declawed version that was being practiced in Japan. Now I see a reversal. We in the practical karate world, you've got people like myself looking at making karate practical again. So we're looking to make karate applicable in self-defense. Because let's face it, 3K karate has nothing to do with self-defense, and step sparring, that sort of thing, has nothing to do with real fighting anyway. So for me to learn the true nature of kata and the old ways of karate, I had to go outside my Shotokan bubble. I took up some judo. I did some jiu-jitsu. I still train jiu-jitsu. I started training with Ian Abernethy. I started training with Patrick McCarthy and some other known people. And that really breathed life into my what was then becoming a very stagnant approach to karate. So by prohibiting people for participating in seminars elsewhere, you're only limiting their growth. And I think it's the responsibility of the senior members to nurture the growth of their members, not restrict it. I think there's a number of reasons why we have this kind of cult-like behavior coming down from these organizations. And this, by the way, is not restricted to karate or the JKA. I haven't personally witnessed it, but I've heard people talk about this sort of mentality in BJJ, that you can't go train with that club because they are under a different instructor. Those guys are bad, these guys are good. And there's a real twisted sense of or expectation of loyalty. So it's not just karate. It's Taekwondo as well. A lot of the big organizations have it. So why does this sort of thing happen? I think if you look at the history of the JKA, over the years we've had many, many, many cases where someone gets disgruntled, unhappy with how things are going. Maybe they don't feel they're having enough influence, whatever the case is, and they leave. And they go join, they go create their own organization. And they take people with them from their old organization, the JKA. And then more people get disgruntled, and they leave. They form their organization and take more people with them. So now what we have is all these Shotokan organizations all over the world. We have tens and tens and tens of thousands of people everywhere, but they all have this root in the JKA. And again, I think if we wouldn't stifle people and limit their growth, maybe we wouldn't have this kind of fractured sense of karate around the world. This might ruffle some feathers. The JKA, so specifically, again, I was with the ISKF, and the ISKF basically refuses to evolve. They do things the same way now as they did when I started in 1990, and I'm sure from the 1980s and 70s and so on. It's the same. There's a refusal to evolve. And I think as the senior members, if you keep people within the bubble of your organization and you don't allow them to see that the grass might be greener and there are better approaches to karate elsewhere, then they're less of a threat. They're less of a threat because they won't realize that what you're teaching is perhaps limited or outdated or inadequate. If you look at step sparring, the 1-step, 3-step, and some of you might do 5-step, it's very, very limited and almost useless in terms of training anything to do with self-defense. Now, I'm talking about you down block, 1, 2, 3 other person, the up blocks, counterattack, that sort of thing is useless. There's much better ways to train that. The ISKF, and again, it's similar for other Shotokan-based organizations and maybe other styles as well. That refusal to evolve is only, it's an act of self-preservation. Because if you are Master X and you're 70 years old and you've been doing karate for 50 years and you're ninth Dan and never have done anything outside of 3K karate training, when this practical karate approach comes in, what do? I don't know any of that. That's a threat. We're not going to explore that. And let's not allow our members to go discover it. I think that's the approach there. I'll share a little something with you. Years ago, I got my hands on a document, and what was it called? Something like the standardization of kata. And it was a proposal within a section of the ISKF. And I thought, okay, this might be interesting. And the whole purpose was to standardize how the katas are going to be performed, because after the ISKF split from the JKA and they started getting different countries as members, they needed to make things the same. That's okay. So, for example, in Heian Yondan, some people will make a kind of a graceful, slow motion like this. Some people will go quickly to the hip and then assume this position. And so the purpose of the document was to, let's do it all the same. Nothing wrong with that. But what really caught my attention and what was one of the red flags for me in terms of a motivator for me to leave was something in the introductory pages. And it acknowledged that there's a growing movement where people are discovering these practical applications for kata. And didn't go into a whole lot of detail, but said there's all kinds of resources online. Then it went on to say, and this is what this really affected me, because I knew right then and there was zero chance for the ISKF to move forward and to evolve. It said, but for the ISKF, the purpose of kata will be for the development of body movement. So right there, they're admitting that they refuse to evolve. And by shutting your members out and keep them in a bubble so they don't discover this, you're only acting in self-preservation. I think that kind of control, where the expectation to conform, say, be a good soldier, don't question, and don't explore, and don't leave outside the Shotokan bubble, it's almost cult-like. And as long as you can control your members, you can preserve your organization and its ways and not be threatened by what else is happening in the world, in the karate world. Some closing thoughts. For my personal journey, where I started to evolve and break away from 3K Shotokan karate, began in probably around 2012. I kind of stumbled across some videos from Ian Abernethy, and who had a very practical approach to, I think it was a Heian Godan video I was watching, the opening sequence 1, 2, 3. And I thought, wow, that makes sense. And he was doing this as a seonagi, a shoulder throw. I thought, wow, that makes sense. It's not the foolishness looking away as I throw an uppercut at someone behind me and ready to jump over a bow staff on this side. Maybe you know what I'm talking about. So I started following him and training with him and other people as well, like Patch McCarthy. Did a bit of judo. I still do some jiu-jitsu. And that cross-training has been so important to me. I was lucky enough to have a sensei who was somewhat open-minded and didn't question me when I wanted to go explore other martial arts. And he actually would let me bring some things back and teach it to the members within his dojo. But cross-training is super, super important. If all you want to do is just get some exercise, then it doesn't really matter what you're doing. If you want to grow as a martial artist and become more well-rounded, you need to get outside of traditional Shotokan, because all that's going to teach you is kind of moving in a straight line really, really fast. Great skill set, but there's other more important things to do. So when I decided in 2020 to leave the ISKF, it was for a number of reasons. This cult of conformity coming from the senior ranks, I didn't really like that too much. But also I knew that staying with the ISKF and the 3K syllabus was going to be stifling and limiting the growth of myself and of my students. So fortunately for me, when I decided to leave in 2020, my sense, they said, yeah, I knew it was just a matter of time. There were no hard feelings. He said, come back and train anytime, which is great. Now, for those of you out there who find yourself kind of nodding and resonating with some of the things I'm saying and can relate to the letter that I wrote to you, maybe you got to ask yourself, well, what do? Do I stay? Do I stay in my Shotokan organization and not grow? Or do I leave? Maybe you're lucky enough to have an instructor who is understanding of your desire to grow, and you can go train with different people and different martial arts. If not, maybe it's some time to ask some questions. Good luck with that. Thanks for listening. I'm Andy Allen for Applied Shotokan.